Welcome to part one of our simplifying rational expressions lesson. So it's going to be broken into a couple pieces. So part one starts with a quick review of factoring. So what can I simplify, or what can I break a complex expression down into simpler pieces? So for instance, I have 3x minus 15. In this case, the only thing I can factor out is 3, and I'm left with x minus 5. For part B, I've got my trinomial, so I'm going to try to figure out what can I factor this into. Well, it needs to multiply to give me 6, but add to give me 5. So that's going to be x plus 2 and x plus 3 and x plus 2. Then we get to the bigger ones where we have something in front of the x squared. That's our a value. So remember, we do a times c. That gives me 36. So I need something that multiplies to give me 36, but adds to give me 15. Well, that's a 12 and a 3. So I'm going to split that middle term into a minus 12x and a minus 3x, because I know if the middle term's a minus, but my last term's a plus, I know I'm going to have both minus. And then my 2x squared and my 18 just slide down. Then I try to factor it in pieces. So 2x squared minus 12x, I can factor a 2x out of each of them, and I'm left with x minus 6. Negative 3x plus 18, I can factor out a negative 3 from each of them, and I'm left with x minus 6. Remember, our goal is to try to get both of those to be the same. So my two pieces are 2x minus 3 and x minus 6. That's my factored form. All right, last one, 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. Again, what multiplies to give me 24? This time, my last term is a minus, so that means I had 1 plus and 1 minus, so that means they have to subtract to give me 5. So what multiplies to give me 24, but subtracts to give me 5? Well, that's 8 and 3. And I want to get a plus 5, so I know the 8's going to be my plus and the 3 is going to be my minus. So I get 6x squared minus or plus 8x minus 3x. I'm just splitting that middle term, minus 4. Then I factor it into pieces. 6x squared plus 8x, I can factor out a 2x, and I'm left with 3x plus 4. Over here, negative 3x minus 4, I want to get 3x plus 4, because remember, I want those two to match, so I must have had to factor out a negative 1. So I get 2x minus 1 and 3x plus 4. So we're going to use those skills here in these next couple of days of lessons, so it's good to review. All right, so next part is finding our excluded value. Now there might be more than one, but again, just set your denominator equal to 0 and solve. So b plus 7 is equal to 0, so b can't be equal to negative 7. So I get 2x plus 1. 2x plus 1 is equal to 0, so 2x is equal to negative 1, or x is negative 1/2, and it can't be equal to negative 1/2. That's my excluded value. Okay. So same thing happens on part E when we have a trinomial. So I need to factor it into pieces and then set it equal to 0. So a squared minus a minus 12. So since there's a 1 in the front, I just have to worry about the 12. What multiplies to give me 12? But because it's a subtracting, I know it's going to be 1 plus and 1 minus. Oh. So what subtracts to give me 1? Well, 4 and 3. Since I want a negative 1 in the middle, that means my 4 is my subtracting and my 3 is my adding. So I have a plus 3 is equal to 0 and a minus 4 is equal to 0. So again, I'm trying to find those excluded values. What can't I plug in because it's going to cause me to get 0 in my denominator? Well, here I would get negative 3, so I can't have a negative 3. And here I would get 4, so I can't have a negative 4. So let's do the bottom 3 here. Again, focus on your denominator and set it equal to 0. So this one's going to factor into k plus 3 and k plus 1 because they add to be 4 but multiply to give me 3. So k plus 3 equals 0. So k can't be negative 3. K plus 1 equal to 0. So k can't be negative 1. So we're just thinking about what values can't I have in those denominators. So here, 2m squared minus m minus 1 is equal to 0. Set the denominator equal to 0. Well, this is one of those where I have both an a and a c value. So 2 times 1 is 2, so they have to multiply to be 2. Since my last term is a minus, I know I'm going to have 1 plus and 1 minus, and they have to give me a minus 1 in the middle. So they got to multiply to give me 2, but subtract to give me 1. Well, that's negative 2m and positive 1m. And then I have my 2m squared and my minus 1. So I'm going to move this piece down because I got to do my factor by grouping here. So 2m squared minus 2m, I can factor out a 2m and get m minus 1. Here, 1m minus 1, and I know I want m minus 1, so I must have factored out a plus 1. So I get 2m plus 1 and m minus 1. Remember, I set it equal to 0. And now I just solve to see what m value would cause me to get 0. That's my excluded value. So here I would get m can't be negative 1/2, and m can't be 1. So I'm simply factoring each one of those, setting it equal to 0, and telling me what number won't work as an x value. So let's do this last one, because this one's going to be a little bigger. So I have a 4 and a 3, so I know it has to multiply to give me 12. Since my last term is a minus, I know I'm going to end up with a plus and a minus. So that means they have to subtract to give me 11. Well, what multiplies to give me 12 but subtracts to give me 11? That must have been 12 and 1. Since I want a plus 11, I know it had to be a plus 12x and a minus 1x. And the minus 3 and the 4x squared just slide down from the original problem. So factor by grouping, so I can pull out a 4x and I get x plus 3. Here I know I want to get an x plus 3, but right now I have a minus 1x and a minus 3, so I can factor out a negative 1. So I get 4x minus 1 and x plus 3 is equal to 0. Set them each equal to 0. 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. X plus 3 is equal to 0. So x can't be 1/4, and x can't be negative 3. Those are my excluded values. So we're kind of putting our factoring skills and our excluded value skills all to work. All right, so last ones. We're going to state the excluded values, but then we're going to see if we can simplify those expressions a little bit. So set my denominator equal to 0. So x can't be 0. That's my excluded value. Here I've got x's and y's, but since they're all being multiplied together, my excluded values are still going to be 0, because I can't multiply either of those things as a 0, otherwise it would give me a 0 in the denominator, and I can't have that. Same thing over here. I can't have a equal to 0 or b equal to 0, because then I would multiply and get 0, and I can't have 0 in my denominator. Now we go back and try to simplify these expressions. So I'm going to kind of go overboard in showing my work so you can kind of see why, but I know some of you will have some quicker ways of getting there. But the idea is kind of factor out what we can for each of them. So I like to kind of pull them apart to see what they're made of and see what I can simplify. So 2x cubed means 2 times x times x times x. 6x means 2 times 3, because that's equal to 6, times x. And then I simply cancel out what I can divide out of both numerator and denominator. What's left is my answer, x squared over 3. So 21x cubed y squared. Well, 21 is 3 times 7 times x times x times x times y times y. 3 x's and 2 y's. In my denominator, I have 3 times x times y. I can cancel a 3, an x, and a y. Oh, and I can do 2 x's and a y. So I'm left with a 7x and a y. 7x, y is my simplified value. So 12ab, well, that's 12 times a times b. I'm not going to break the 12 into pieces simply because there's no number in my denominator other than a 1, so I know there's nothing I can cancel out of the 12. Here I have a times a and b times b. I can cancel an a and a b, and I'm left with 12 in my numerator and a, b in my denominator. So that's how I use my factoring and my simplifying skills, all to simplify those expressions.